Pick any woman here. The outlaw spat. The Warchief shoved them aside. I'll take the one you hurt. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The sun was beginning to set over the small, dusty town of Copper Springs, casting long shadows over the half-empty streets. A group of rough men, led by a notorious outlaw, gathered outside the saloon, their boots clicking against the wooden planks. Their laughter echoed through the empty streets, a sound that carried both danger and menace. In the center of the commotion stood a young woman, her hands bound in rough rope, her head bowed low, as if she wished she could disappear. The outlaw, a tall man with a scar running across his cheek, sneered at her. Pick any woman here, the outlaw spat, his voice dripping with cruelty. They're all yours for the taking. Except her. He pointed toward the woman, his words sharp as daggers. The crowd of men jeered, their eyes flicking from her to each other, sizing her up like a piece of cattle at auction. The woman's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. She had been dragged from her cabin earlier that morning, her home ransacked, her life turned upside down in an instant. She had heard of the outlaw, Jake Blackjack Morrison, the terror of the Dakota Territory. He was a man who took what he wanted, and in this moment, he wanted her. But as the men laughed and moved closer, something unexpected happened. From the edge of the crowd, a figure emerged. He was tall and imposing, with the grace of a predator and the quiet intensity of a man who had seen it all. His face was unreadable, his eyes dark and steady, as though nothing in this chaotic world could shake his composure. He moved with purpose, parting the crowd with a single motion, his presence commanding the attention of every man there. The outlaw stopped his taunting, his eyes narrowing as he took in the newcomer. The crowd fell silent, sensing the shift in the air. This man was no ordinary cowboy. He wore the distinctive feathers of a war chief, his long black hair tied back in a simple braid. His clothes, though plain, had the wear of someone who had lived through countless battles, both with nature and men. He was a Comanche warrior, and in that moment, the very ground seemed to tremble beneath his feet. The outlaw sneered, trying to maintain control of the situation. "What do you want, Indian?" he spat, his voice thick with disdain. The warrior didn't answer at first. Instead, he locked eyes with the woman, and for a brief moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. She could see the quiet strength in his gaze, a silent promise of something more than just survival. The warrior's voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of authority. "I'll take the one you hurt." He stepped forward, his movements deliberate and confident, his gaze never leaving the woman's face. The outlaw's men shifted nervously, unsure of how to respond. Some were taken aback by the warrior's presence. Others were more concerned with the fact that this Comanche wasn't afraid of them. The tension in the air was thick, like the calm before a storm. Without another word, the warrior moved toward the woman, his hand reaching out to untie the ropes that bound her wrists. The crowd watched in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what was happening. But the woman, feeling the weight of the warrior's touch, felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She had expected nothing but pain, but instead, she felt something else, protection. She had never known what true safety felt like, not in a world that had abandoned her at every turn. But this warrior, this stranger, was offering it to her, without asking for anything in return. As the last of the ropes fell away, the warrior placed his hand gently on her shoulder, his voice low but firm. "You are safe now." The outlaw's men began to murmur, their unease growing with every passing second. The warrior stood tall, unyielding, as if daring them to make a move. But none did. The outlaw, realizing he had lost control of the situation, cursed under his breath and motioned for his men to retreat. The silence that followed was deafening, the dust settling like the calm after a battle. The warrior turned to the woman, his face softening just slightly. "Come with me. You have a new life now." And with that, they disappeared into the fading light of the evening, leaving behind the chaos of Copper Springs and the broken world she had once known. I should have expected the unexpected, but nothing could prepare me for the sense of calm that washed over me as the Comanche warrior led me away from the chaos. His steps were sure, confident, like a man who had lived through storms, both on the battlefield and in life. The evening light cast long shadows as we moved through the empty streets of Copper Springs, leaving the sound of the saloon's raucous laughter behind us. I had no idea where we were going or what would come next, but something in his presence made me believe that, for the first time in years, I would be safe. He stopped just outside a small, weathered cabin at the edge of town. The structure looked old, its wooden walls marked by the harshness of the land. It had the feel of a place that had been lived in, not by choice, but by necessity. The warrior motioned for me to enter first, and as I stepped through the door, I was greeted by the warmth of a fire crackling in the hearth. The smell of roasting meat filled the air, a stark contrast to the cold fear that had consumed me all day. The warrior closed the door behind him and set about preparing the meal in silence. His movements were fluid, practiced, as though he had done this countless times before. I stood there, unsure of what to do. I was a woman with no past, no future, just the lingering taste of fear on my tongue and the faint hope that somehow I had found a place to belong. He did not speak for a long while, his focus entirely on the food he was preparing. I watched him, the way his hands moved with purpose and precision, as if every action had meaning. It was clear that this man was more than just a warrior. He was a protector, someone who understood the importance of survival. As the meal simmered, I sat near the fire, wrapping my arms around my knees, still unsure of what to say. My mind raced with questions, but I held them back. It felt wrong to speak, to ask. I had been brought here, saved, but I had no idea why he had chosen me. Why not one of the other women in the town? Why not anyone else? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke, his voice deep and steady, breaking the silence between us. "You are safe now," he said simply. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. "I know you are afraid, but you are no longer alone." The reassurance in his tone made my chest tighten, but also eased the tight knot of fear that had settled there. He did not ask questions, did not pry into my past. He simply allowed me to exist in his presence, offering me something I had not felt in years, peace. As the night wore on, he placed a plate of food before me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I ate without looking over my shoulder, without wondering if the next moment would bring another wave of terror. The fire crackled, the shadows danced, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to relax. I was no longer in the clutches of the outlaw or his men. I was no longer just a piece of property to be sold, traded, or discarded. I was something else entirely. The warrior sat across from me, his eyes never leaving mine. "Tomorrow, we will leave this place," he said, his tone unwavering. "There are people who need you. You are not just a survivor. You are something more." His words were cryptic, but they stirred something deep inside me, a flicker of hope that had long been extinguished. What did he mean by "there are people who need you"? And why did he keep saying I was something more? It was all too much to take in, but I had no choice but to accept it. In that moment, I realized that my life had changed. It had changed not because of the horrors I had endured, but because someone had seen me. Someone had chosen to stand between me and the darkness. And for the first time, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, there was something more out there waiting for me. I woke up to the sound of the wind howling through the cracks of the cabin, a sharp reminder that the world outside was as unforgiving as ever. The warmth from the fire still lingered in my bones, but I could feel the cold creeping in from the open window. I glanced around the small room, taking in the simple, yet comforting surroundings. It was quiet here, peaceful in a way that felt like a dream. I could almost convince myself that nothing had ever happened, that I had not been dragged through the worst of humanity, that I was not still running from the past. But the reality of who I was and what I had endured hung heavily on my shoulders, like a cloak I couldn't shake off. I stood up slowly, stretching my stiff limbs, and made my way to the window. The sun had barely risen, casting a pale light over the snow-covered landscape outside. The silence of the morning was broken only by the distant call of a hawk and the soft crunch of snow beneath my feet as the Comanche warrior approached the cabin. He had left early, heading out to scout the land, or perhaps just to clear his mind. I wasn't sure, but he had been gone for hours. I turned to face him as he stepped inside, his eyes meeting mine with the same intensity that had first drawn me to him. "We leave today," he said, his voice calm, but there was something unspoken in his words. It was a command, not a suggestion. He had already made up his mind, and there was no room for hesitation. I nodded, understanding that my fate was no longer in my hands. He had given me protection, a life I had never known, but now it was time for me to step into whatever future he had planned for us. As he began to pack, gathering what little gear he had, I couldn't help but wonder where we were going. Where could a warrior like him take me that would keep us safe from the people who had hunted me, from the men who had torn my life apart? "You have a purpose now," he said as he rolled up his bedroll and strapped it to his horse. "It is time you know it." His words were cryptic, but they stirred something deep inside me. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to be ready to embrace whatever life awaited us. I had no idea what that meant, but I didn't question him. Not now, not after everything he had done for me. As we rode through the snow, the world around us grew quieter, the trees whispering in the wind. I sat behind him, clutching the reins of my own horse, trying to find my balance. The cold was biting, but it didn't matter. I wasn't just surviving anymore. For the first time, I felt like I was part of something. The warrior didn't speak as we rode, but I could sense that he was always alert, always watching. He had a way of moving through the world that made everything else seem insignificant. He was a man of few words, but every action he took spoke volumes. I found myself wondering again who he really was. What had brought him here, to this remote cabin in the middle of nowhere, to me? What had made him choose to protect someone like me? "Why are you helping me?" I asked, breaking the silence. The question had been on the tip of my tongue for days, but I hadn't had the courage to ask it until now. He didn't answer right away, his gaze fixed ahead. For a moment, I thought he might not answer at all. But then, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Because you are more than what they made you believe." His words hit me like a slap to the face, and I couldn't quite understand what he meant. More than what they made me believe. Who was I really, if not the woman who had been abandoned, betrayed, and left to survive on her own? He glanced over his shoulder at me, his eyes softening just a little. "You are not just a survivor. You are a warrior in your own right." The words struck me harder than I expected, and for a moment, I was speechless. Me a warrior? It didn't make sense. I was just a woman who had been discarded by the world, a woman who had no family, no place to call home. But somehow, in his eyes, I was more than that. I was part of something greater. As we rode further, I began to feel it too. The warrior's strength, his unwavering confidence, was rubbing off on me. I wasn't sure where we were headed or what awaited us at the end of this journey, but I knew one thing for sure. For the first time in my life, I had a chance to be more than I had ever thought possible. With each passing mile, I was beginning to see that the future wasn't as bleak as I had once believed. The warrior was right. I had a purpose now, and no matter where this road led, I was ready to face it. I woke up to the sound of wind whistling through the trees, the chill in the air sharp against my skin. The warrior was already awake, packing our things with a sense of urgency, his movements efficient and precise, as if he had done this 100 times before. I could see the muscles in his back ripple as he adjusted the straps on his saddle, his face set in its usual, unreadable expression. I had come to realize that he was a man of few words, but his actions spoke louder than any words ever could. As he worked, I sat up slowly, feeling the weight of the night's rest still heavy in my bones. The fire had died down to embers, casting a soft glow across the room. My thoughts drifted back to the journey ahead. The warrior had told me we were leaving this morning, but he hadn't said where we were going. He hadn't told me what awaited us or what I was supposed to do once we arrived. I had no choice but to follow him. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was moving toward something, but I had no idea what it was. The warrior turned toward me, his dark eyes meeting mine. "We leave now," he said, his voice steady, as if there was no doubt in his mind. I nodded, though the uncertainty inside me grew. There were so many questions I wanted to ask, but I knew now wasn't the time. As we rode out from the cabin and into the wild terrain, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was drawing us forward, something larger than either of us. The landscape stretched out before us, barren in some places, lush in others, a reminder of the harsh beauty of this land. The snow had stopped falling, but the air remained thick with the remnants of the storm. We rode in silence for hours, the only sounds being the crunch of hooves in the snow and the occasional call of a bird overhead. The warrior remained as silent as ever, his eyes scanning the horizon, always alert, always aware of his surroundings. I, on the other hand, found my mind drifting to the past. What had brought me to this point? How had I gone from a woman at the mercy of an outlaw to now riding beside a warrior, someone whose life seemed so different from my own? It didn't seem real. I had never imagined I would find safety in the arms of a stranger, much less a man from a people who had been so misunderstood by the world. As we continued our journey, the landscape began to change. The rugged terrain gave way to forests, and the air grew warmer as the sun climbed higher. My body, stiff from the cold, began to relax as the warmth of the day started to seep into my bones. We stopped by a small stream for a rest, the sound of the water rushing over the rocks soothing. The warrior dismounted first, and I followed suit, my legs aching from the ride. I knelt down to drink from the stream, the cool water refreshing as it ran over my lips. As I stood up, I glanced around, noticing that the warrior was watching me closely, his gaze never leaving me. He seemed to be waiting for something, though I didn't know what. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice low and measured. "You are not like the others," he said. His words startled me, and I looked up at him, unsure of what he meant. "You have the heart of a warrior," he added, his voice soft but firm. "The strength you carry within you is not something they can take away." I stared at him, my mind racing. What did he see in me? I had never thought of myself as strong, never thought of myself as anything but a victim of circumstance. But in that moment, something inside me stirred. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been stronger than I gave myself credit for. The warrior stepped closer, his expression unreadable as always, but there was a glimmer of something in his eyes. "We are going to a place where you can begin anew," he said, his voice steady. "There, you will learn what you are truly capable of." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing, but the weight of his words settled in my chest. The journey ahead wasn't just about survival. It was about discovering who I could be, who I was meant to become. As we mounted our horses again and continued on, I felt a shift inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just running from something. I was running toward something, toward a future that was uncertain, yes, but one that was mine to shape. The warrior led the way, as always, but this time I felt like I was more than just a follower. I was beginning to understand the power of choice, the power of taking control of my own destiny. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. The warrior had shown me a world where survival wasn't the only option. There was something more waiting for me, something that had nothing to do with the past I had left behind, and everything to do with the woman I was becoming. I had never imagined a life like this, a life where I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next threat to appear. But here, riding alongside the warrior, everything felt different. The landscape around us was wild, untamed, but it was ours to explore, to conquer. There was a freedom in that, a freedom I had never known. The warrior had said we were headed somewhere important, but he hadn't told me where. Each day we rode, the terrain changing beneath us, and still, the questions remained unanswered. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't desperate for answers. I wasn't consumed by fear or regret. I was simply living. The days blurred together as we traveled through forests, across rivers, and over hills. At night, we camped under the stars, and the warrior would always sit watch, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of danger. I never felt afraid, though. I trusted him completely. I had learned to survive, to be strong, but he was teaching me something else, to live. One morning, after a long day's ride, we stopped by a stream to rest. The warrior dismounted, as always, and went to work gathering firewood, his movements as fluid and effortless as a dancer's. I stayed behind, watching him for a moment. There was something so calming about his presence, something that made the world seem a little less harsh, a little more manageable. As I sat by the water, I found myself thinking about everything that had led me here, the life I had left behind, the pain I had endured. I had never expected to find peace, not after everything. But somehow, in this quiet place, with the warrior by my side, I was starting to feel it. I had never been the kind of woman who thought she deserved happiness, but the more I was with him, the more I realized that maybe I did. Maybe we all did. The warrior returned, carrying an armful of wood. He set it down beside me and began to start a fire, his hands moving with practiced ease. I watched him, fascinated by how everything he did seemed to have a purpose, a reason. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke louder than any conversation could. After a few moments of silence, he finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "You are learning to trust," he said. I looked up at him, surprised by the sudden shift in conversation. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You are no longer just surviving. You are living," he replied. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something soft in them, something that reminded me of the bond we had forged. "You will never be just a survivor again." I didn't know what to say. His words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I had spent so much of my life just trying to survive, just trying to make it through another day, but now, for the first time, I was starting to understand what it meant to truly live. The warrior was showing me that, not with words, but with his actions, his patience. I sat there for a moment, letting his words sink in, and then I nodded. "I understand," I said softly. The warrior didn't smile, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor, as though he was proud of me in a way he didn't know how to express. We sat by the fire for a while longer, the warmth from the flames casting a soft glow over us. The night was quiet, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the distant rustling of leaves. It was peaceful, in a way that felt almost foreign to me. I had never known a life like this, one without constant fear, without the shadows of the past hanging over me. But with him, it felt possible. As the fire burned low, the warrior stood up and looked out into the distance. "We leave at dawn," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "There is much more for you to learn. We will find your place in this world, where you can live without fear, without regret." I stood up too, feeling a sense of determination building inside me. Whatever lay ahead, I was ready for it. I had a purpose now, something to fight for, something beyond mere survival. The warrior was leading me toward a future I couldn't yet see, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like I was becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone worthy of living, not just surviving. The fire flickered out as we prepared to sleep, and I closed my eyes, trusting in the warrior's words. Tomorrow, we would continue our journey, and whatever came next, I was ready to face it. I woke up to the sound of the wind howling through the trees again, but this time, it felt different. The air had a sharper edge to it, and the faint glow of dawn filtered through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. I could feel the change in the atmosphere, the anticipation that something was about to happen. We had been traveling for days, moving farther from the safety of the cabin, deeper into the wilds of the land. Every step took us further from the life I had once known, but I wasn't afraid. For the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The warrior was already up, as always, preparing the camp for the journey. Ahead, his movements were efficient, but there was a quietness to him this morning, as if he was holding something back, something important. I stood up slowly, stretching my sore limbs from the night's rest. The previous days had been long, the journey difficult, but I had learned to keep up with him, to match his pace, and to never show weakness. The warrior had shown me more than just how to survive. He had shown me how to live with purpose. As I approached him, he glanced up, his eyes meeting mine with that same intensity that had become so familiar. "Today is different," he said, his voice low but firm. "We are not just passing through." I raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. "Where are we going?" I asked, my curiosity getting the better of me. The warrior didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around, his gaze sweeping over the land, as if searching for something. "We are going to find the place where you truly belong," he said finally. His words struck me harder than I expected. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding. "You have a place in this world. You are not just a survivor, not just a woman who has been abandoned. There is more for you," he said. I didn't know what to say. I had spent so many years running from one danger to the next, just trying to stay alive. I had never thought beyond that, never allowed myself to dream of a life where I wasn't constantly fighting. But his words made me question everything. Maybe I wasn't just surviving anymore. Maybe I could do more than just exist. The warrior turned and started walking, and I followed him, my mind racing with questions. We rode for hours, the landscape changing with each passing mile. The trees began to thin out, and the terrain became rockier, more rugged. The warrior didn't stop, didn't speak, but I could sense that we were getting closer to whatever he had planned. The further we went, the more I felt the weight of his words. What was this place he was taking me to? And why did I feel like I was on the brink of something important? The journey took us to the edge of a cliff, where the land dropped away into a vast valley below. The view was breathtaking, the land stretching out in all directions, untouched by the hand of man. I felt a strange sense of awe, as if I was standing at the edge of something vast, something greater than I could understand. The warrior dismounted and turned to me. "This is it," he said. "This is where you will learn who you truly are." I looked around, trying to understand what he meant. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice small, unsure. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm but comforting. "Here, you will find your true strength. You are not just a woman running from her past. You are a warrior, just like me." The words hung in the air, and I felt them settle deep within me, resonating in a way I couldn't explain. I had never considered myself strong, never thought of myself as capable of anything beyond surviving. But here, in this wild, untamed place, I could feel something shifting inside me. The warrior was right. There was more to me than I had realized. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the valley in shadows, the warrior sat beside me, and we both stared out into the vastness before us. For the first time, I wasn't just waiting for something to happen. I wasn't just surviving the next moment. I was here, in this place, with a purpose. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. This journey was not just about escaping my past. It was about stepping into my future, about becoming someone who could stand tall, no matter what came next. The warrior had shown me how to survive, but now, he was showing me how to live. And I was ready. I woke up before dawn, the first light of day creeping over the horizon. The warrior was already awake, tending to the fire and preparing for the day ahead. The air was crisp and the ground beneath my feet still cold from the night. I had never known such stillness, such a quiet peace. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of something real, something solid. I stood up, stretching my muscles, still getting used to the routine of early mornings. The warrior glanced over at me, nodding as if he knew exactly what I needed. "We move soon," he said. His voice was always calm, but there was an underlying urgency in it today. I had learned not to question him, to trust that wherever he led, it was where I needed to go. We had been on this journey for weeks, and although I still didn't fully understand where it was taking us, I felt a sense of purpose, of belonging, that I had never known before. The warrior had shown me that I was capable of more than simply surviving. He had given me the tools to start living again. I had learned how to fight, how to trust my instincts, and how to protect myself. But there was still much more for me to discover. As we packed up camp and mounted our horses, I could feel the tension building in the air. The warrior was different today. There was something in his eyes, a look I couldn't quite place, but it made me uneasy. He was always calm, always in control, but today, something was different. We rode for hours, the landscape changing around us. The forest thinned out, giving way to open plains, and the sound of our horses' hooves echoed in the stillness. I could see the warrior's eyes scanning the horizon, alert as always, but his posture was more rigid than usual. The silence between us was thick, and I could feel the weight of his thoughts pressing down on me. "What's happening?" I finally asked, my voice breaking the silence. He didn't look at me, but I saw his jaw tighten. "We are nearing the end of your journey," he said, his voice steady but low. "What do you mean?" I asked, confusion creeping into my voice. "You have learned much, but there is one more thing you must understand before you can truly live," he replied. I wanted to ask more, to push for answers, but something in his tone stopped me. I knew better than to push him. I had learned that patience was key, especially with him. The journey continued, the land stretching out before us, but I felt a sense of foreboding settle in. We stopped for the night near a small stream, the sound of the water soothing against the growing tension. The warrior started a fire, and as he did, I watched him closely, wondering what he wasn't saying. I had come to trust him, but I still didn't fully understand him. There was so much about him that remained a mystery, and I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever truly know him. He set the fire, his movements fluid and practiced, before sitting down across from me. "This is where your path changes," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. His voice was soft, but there was a weight to it, like he was speaking not just to me, but to something deeper inside me. I didn't know what he meant, but I felt it. I felt the shift in the air, the tension that had been building for days. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice quiet, unsure. He paused for a moment, then spoke, his words slow and deliberate. "You must decide who you are," he said. "Are you just a survivor, or will you step into the person you were always meant to be?" His question hit me harder than I expected, and I found myself at a loss for words. I had spent so long just surviving, just trying to make it through each day, that I had never truly thought about who I was meant to be. But now, as I looked into the warrior's eyes, I realized that I had a choice. I could keep running, keep hiding from my past, or I could embrace who I was, who I could be. "I don't know if I'm ready," I whispered. The warrior's expression softened, his gaze never leaving mine. "You are ready," he said. "You have always been ready. Now, you just have to believe it." His words settled deep in my chest, and I could feel the weight of them. I had never believed in myself, never thought I was capable of anything more than surviving. But in that moment, I realized that the warrior was right. I had already come so far. It was time to stop running from my past and start moving toward my future. The fire crackled, and the night grew darker, but I felt something shift inside me. It was time to stop hiding, time to stop being afraid. The warrior had given me everything I needed to step into the person I was always meant to be. All I had to do was believe in myself. And for the first time in my life, I did. I had never realized how much time we had spent traveling, how much distance had been put between me and the life I once knew. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, I was not afraid. With each passing day, the warrior taught me more than just how to fight. He taught me how to think, how to survive in ways I never imagined. We had moved through forests, crossed rivers, and journeyed across open plains. The land around us was wild and untamed, just like the life I was beginning to carve out for myself. The warrior had said we were heading to a place where I could truly find myself, a place where I could belong. It had been weeks, and yet, I had no idea what that place looked like or where it was. We had been traveling toward the unknown for so long that I began to wonder if the destination was something deeper, something within myself. As the days passed, I could feel a change inside me. The person I had been, the woman who had survived the brutality of the world, was slowly fading away, replaced by something else, something stronger. The warrior had helped me see that I was not just a survivor. I had the heart of a fighter, of someone who could stand tall in the face of anything. I had learned to trust in my instincts, to rely on my own strength, and most importantly, to trust in him. But today, something was different. The air felt heavy, as if something was coming. The warrior had been unusually quiet, his gaze constantly scanning the horizon, and there was a tension in his posture that I hadn't seen before. As we rode through the thickening woods, I felt the shift in the atmosphere. The warrior stopped suddenly, his hand raised in a signal for me to halt. I did, unsure of what had caught his attention. His eyes were narrowed, focused, and his hand rested lightly on the hilt of his knife. The silence was thick, oppressive, and I could feel my heart rate quicken as I waited for him to speak. "They are close," he said, his voice low but steady. I nodded, knowing that whatever was coming, we would face it together. "Stay close to me," he added, his eyes meeting mine, with an intensity that I couldn't look away from. He didn't need to say more. I had learned to trust him with my life, and I wasn't about to stop now. We moved forward cautiously, our horses barely making a sound as we traveled deeper into the forest. The trees were dense here, and the path ahead was barely visible. The warrior was always in the lead, his movements quiet and controlled, like a shadow blending into the surroundings. As we neared a clearing, the sound of voices reached my ears. I froze, the tension in the air making it hard to breathe. The warrior held up his hand again, signaling for us to dismount. I followed his lead, sliding down from my horse as quietly as possible. We crouched low, moving toward the edge of the clearing where the voices were coming from. The warrior motioned for me to stay behind a cluster of trees, and I obeyed, pressing my back against the rough bark as I tried to steady my breathing. I could hear the faint crackling of a fire, the murmur of voices in the distance. The warrior's eyes scanned the area with precision, and I knew he was calculating every move, every sound, with the precision of a hunter. I wanted to ask him what was going on, what he had seen, but I remained silent. I knew that any words would only distract him, and I trusted his judgment. The minutes seemed to stretch into eternity as we waited, the sounds of the fire growing louder, the voices closer. Finally, the warrior moved, his body shifting silently like a ghost. I followed, staying close behind him, my steps barely making a sound as we moved into the clearing. Ahead of us, I could see a group of men gathered around the fire. They were rough-looking, dressed in tattered clothing, and their voices were low and gruff. But it wasn't their appearance that made my blood run cold. It was the look in their eyes. They were men who had lived through violence and death, and I could see that they weren't afraid to spill more blood if it came to that. The warrior stayed hidden, his presence a silent force behind me. He didn't need to move, didn't need to speak. His calmness was enough to settle me, to remind me that we had faced danger before, and we would face it again. But this time, I could feel something different in the air, something more dangerous. The group around the fire began to laugh, their voices filled with cruelty and malice. One of the men stood up and began pacing back and forth, his hands gesturing wildly as he spoke. I could hear the words now, the way they slurred in anger, but one word caught my attention. Comanche. The man spat the word like it was poison. My heart skipped a beat, and I looked at the warrior beside me. He had gone still, his eyes narrowing as he listened. I knew that word too. It was a name that had always carried with it fear, respect, and hatred. They hunt us, the warrior murmured, his voice cold. I knew then that we were not just facing outlaws. We were facing something far more dangerous. The men were hunting him. And now, they were hunting me too. I could feel the tension building as the voices of the men grew louder, more aggressive. They had no idea we were watching, hidden in the shadows, but it was clear that the warrior had caught their attention. I stood motionless, barely breathing, watching as the men continued to speak in their coarse, angry tones. The word Comanche hung in the air like a curse, and I could see the hate in their eyes, the anger burning just beneath the surface. The warrior was still beside me, silent and focused, his eyes never leaving the men as he assessed the situation. I could feel the weight of his presence, his calmness, as if he were the eye of the storm. In the distance, the fire crackled, and the men continued to laugh, unaware of the danger creeping closer. The warrior's hand moved to the knife at his belt, his fingers brushing the hilt lightly, as if ensuring it was there, ready for use. I didn't ask any questions. I knew better than to speak when he was in this state, when his focus was completely on the threat before us. The minutes seemed to drag on as we waited, but I could feel something shifting inside me. I had spent so long hiding from danger, running from threats I couldn't control, but now, standing here with the warrior, I realized that I had a choice. I could stand and fight alongside him, or I could hide behind him, always waiting for someone else to save me. The decision was clear. The warrior shifted slightly, his posture alert, and I could sense that the time had come. Without a word, he moved swiftly and silently, his body blending into the shadows as he approached the group of men. I followed, staying as close as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. We were close now, close enough to hear the men's words clearly. They were talking about the bounty they had placed on the warrior's head, about how they planned to capture him and collect the reward. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. They were hunting him, and by extension, they were hunting me too. The warrior didn't hesitate. He moved with the speed and precision of someone who had done this countless times before, slipping past the men and into the clearing where they were gathered. The first man didn't even have time to react before the warrior was on him, his knife flashing in the firelight. There was no noise, no struggle, just the swift, silent motion of a predator in its element. The other men froze for a moment, their eyes wide with shock as they realized what was happening. But it was too late. The warrior was already on the move, his knife flashing again, taking down another man before they could even reach for their guns. I stayed back, watching as the warrior fought, his movements fluid and controlled, a deadly dance that left no room for mercy. I knew he didn't need my help, But I also knew that I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I had to act. I had to prove to myself that I was more than just a passive observer in my own life. I moved quickly, circling behind one of the remaining men, my heart racing. The man had his back turned, too focused on the warrior to notice me. I took a deep breath, then lunged forward, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. He let out a strangled cry as I forced him to the ground, the surprise of the attack leaving him disoriented. The warrior finished off the last of the men with a quick, efficient strike. He didn't speak as he wiped the blood from his blade, his face calm and unreadable. But I could see the faintest hint of approval in his eyes as he glanced at me. I stood there, breathing heavily, feeling a mix of exhilaration and fear. The reality of what we had just done, what we had survived, was settling in. I had faced danger head-on, not as a victim, but as a participant in my own fate. The warrior sheathed his knife and turned to me. "You fought well," he said, his voice steady. "You are not just surviving. You are living." His words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. It was the first time I had ever truly believed it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and I was choosing my own path. We left the clearing behind, moving swiftly through the trees as the night grew darker. The fire from the men's camp was nothing more than a faint glow in the distance, but the events of the night had left their mark on me. The warrior had shown me what it meant to be strong, to be capable, and now I was beginning to understand what it meant to stand alongside him, not just as a companion, but as an equal. We rode through the night, the weight of the day's events still heavy in my chest, but there was a lightness to my step now, a sense of purpose I had never known. The warrior had taught me how to fight, how to survive, but now, he was teaching me how to be free. I woke up to the soft glow of dawn breaking through the trees. The night had been long, and the remnants of the previous day's battle still hung in the air, like a heavy fog that wouldn't dissipate. The warrior was already up, his silhouette standing against the rising sun as he tended to the fire. There was no urgency in his movements, only a calm, unshakable sense of purpose. I sat up, stretching the stiffness from my muscles, and watched him for a moment. Despite everything that had happened, there was peace here, in this moment, in the space between us. I was no longer just the woman who had been dragged from her home, used and abandoned. I had fought. I had stood my ground. And I was beginning to understand that I was not simply surviving anymore. I was living, and I was changing. The warrior turned to me, his gaze steady, his eyes unreadable as always. "We move today," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "It's time to leave this place behind." I nodded, the words not fully registering at first. It hadn't hit me until now, but we had been moving for days, always ahead of some unseen threat, always searching for something. But where were we going? What was this all for? The warrior had told me I had a purpose, but he had not revealed what that purpose was. All I knew was that whatever lay ahead, I was ready for it. "Where are we going?" I asked, not out of doubt, but out of curiosity. The warrior didn't answer right away. Instead, he simply mounted his horse and motioned for me to do the same. We had learned to communicate without words, and I trusted him enough to follow without question. We rode for hours, the silence between us comfortable, the landscape changing with every mile we traveled. The trees became sparser, replaced by rocky terrain that seemed to stretch on forever. It was as if the land itself was testing us, asking if we were worthy of what lay ahead. I didn't know where we were going, but with each step, I could feel the tension building in my chest. Something was coming, something big. As we reached a ridge, the warrior stopped and looked out over the valley below. I followed his gaze, and my breath caught in my throat. The sight before me was breathtaking, vast, wild, untouched. It was a place where civilization had never reached, a place that belonged to the land, not man. It felt like the edge of the world. "This is it," the warrior said, his voice carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. "This is where you will find what you've been searching for." My heart raced, the weight of his words sinking in. Was this it? Was this the place where I was meant to become more than just a survivor? The warrior dismounted and turned to me, his eyes softening just slightly. "This land will teach you. It will show you who you are." I didn't know what to say, but I stepped forward, my legs unsteady, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "You need to listen," he said simply. "To the land. To yourself." I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure what he meant. I had spent so much time running from my past, so much time trying to outrun fear and pain, that I hadn't given myself the chance to really listen to what I wanted, what I needed. The warrior led me to a small clearing, where the land opened up to reveal a small stream running through it. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, the sounds of the forest filling the space around us. The warrior knelt by the stream, his hands brushing over the rocks, his eyes closed as if feeling something deeper. I watched him for a moment, unsure of what to do. Finally, he looked up at me, his expression calm. "You are not broken," he said. "You may feel that way, but you are not. You have been carrying the weight of your past for too long. Let it go." His words hit me like a wave, and for a moment, I felt something inside me stir. The weight of everything I had been through, the pain, the loss, the fear, had been a burden I carried in silence. But here, in this place, with this warrior, I could feel the possibility of something else. Something more. I knelt beside him, the cool water of the stream rushing past my fingertips. The sounds of the forest surrounded me, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. I closed my eyes, letting the peace of the land wash over me. I wasn't sure what was happening or what was coming next, but I knew one thing. I had found something I never expected to find. A chance to start over. A chance to be more than just a survivor. "I'm ready," I whispered, though I wasn't entirely sure what I meant by that. The warrior turned to me, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Good," he said, "because this is where your journey truly begins." The words settled deep inside me, and for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The warrior had led me here, but now, it was up to me to walk the path ahead. I stood at the edge of the clearing, my breath coming in steady intervals as I took in the vastness of the land around me. The warrior had shown me this place, this wild expanse that felt like it had been untouched by time. The wind blew through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth, a reminder that this was where I needed to be. I could feel the warrior's presence behind me, his steady gaze watching, waiting for me to take the next step. This was the moment he had been preparing me for, the moment where I would have to make a choice. For so long, I had lived in the shadows of my past, letting it dictate my every move. I had been running from it, hiding from the things I couldn't change. But now, standing here in this place of freedom, I realized that it was time to stop running. The warrior's words echoed in my mind. "You are not broken." I had spent so long believing that I was, that I had been torn apart by everything I had endured. But now, I could feel something shifting inside me, something that had been buried beneath the weight of my fears and doubts. I wasn't broken. I was whole. I turned to face the warrior, my heart steady, my mind clear. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice calm but full of uncertainty. He smiled, a small but knowing smile that made something warm stir within me. "You do what you were meant to do," he said simply. "You live. You find your place in this world, and you take it." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. For so long, I had felt like I didn't belong anywhere, like I was just passing through life, waiting for something to happen. But now, I realized that it was up to me to make something happen. It was time to stop being a passive observer and start being an active participant in my own life. The warrior didn't say anything else, but his eyes spoke volumes. I knew he was giving me the space to make my own choice, to decide for myself who I wanted to be. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the earth beneath my feet, steady and solid. The warrior watched me closely, but I could see the pride in his eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I wasn't trying to escape anymore. I was walking toward something. I was walking toward my future. As we rode deeper into the wilderness, the landscape began to change. The terrain grew more rugged, the trees thicker, the air heavier with the scent of earth and pine. We had been traveling for hours, and the silence between us was comfortable, no longer filled with the tension of uncertainty. I had made my choice. I was ready for whatever lay ahead. The warrior had taught me so much, not just about surviving in this world, but about living in it. He had shown me that I could be strong, that I could stand on my own, and that I could carve out my place in this world. And now, as the day wore on and the sky began to darken, I knew that I was ready for the next chapter of my life. We made camp as night fell, the fire crackling in the stillness of the night. The warrior prepared the food, his movements efficient and steady, while I gathered wood for the fire. It was a simple, peaceful routine, but it was the first time in a long while that I had felt truly at peace. As we sat around the fire, eating in silence, I realized how far I had come since I first met the warrior. I had been broken, lost, and afraid, but now, I felt like I was whole again. The warrior had given me the strength to find myself, to embrace the woman I had always been but had never allowed myself to be. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and I was ready to face whatever challenges came next. The warrior turned to me, his gaze steady. "Tomorrow, we move again," he said. "There is more for you to learn, but you are ready." His words filled me with a quiet confidence, and I nodded, knowing that I was ready for whatever came next. We had traveled far, but the journey was far from over. And now, for the first time, I was ready to walk it with my head held high, knowing that I was not just a survivor of my past, but a creator of my future. I woke up to the sound of rustling leaves, the sun already rising in the distance. The morning air was cool, but not as cold as it had been in the past. The warmth of the fire from the night before lingered in my bones, a comfort that reminded me of how far I had come. The warrior was already up, his movements quiet and sure, just as they always were. He never rushed, always took his time, and there was something calming about the rhythm of his actions. I had learned a lot from him in the weeks we had been traveling together, but there was still so much more I needed to understand. We had been moving for days, each step taking us further into the unknown, but it was no longer as frightening as it once was. I had come to trust in the journey, and in him. Today, though, something was different. The warrior's posture was more alert than usual, his gaze sharp and focused. I could feel the shift in the air, the weight of the moment. Something was coming. I stood up slowly, stretching my arms above my head, and glanced at the warrior. His eyes met mine, and he gave a slight nod. "We are near," he said, his voice low, but there was a firmness in it that made my chest tighten with anticipation. "Near what?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. He didn't answer right away, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch in the smallest of smiles. "You will see," he replied. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the unspoken understanding between us. We mounted our horses and began to ride, the morning sun casting long shadows across the ground. The path ahead was clear, but I could feel the tension in the warrior's movements. He was always alert, always prepared, but today, there was an energy in him that I had never seen before. As we rode, the landscape began to change. The trees thinned out, replaced by open fields and rolling hills. The earth beneath us grew firmer, the ground more solid, and I could feel a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The warrior didn't speak, but his pace quickened, as if he knew we were nearing something significant. I followed, matching his pace, my heart pounding in my chest as I wondered what awaited us. We reached the top of a hill, and the warrior slowed, his eyes scanning the horizon. I pulled my horse to a stop beside him, following his gaze. Below us, nestled in the valley, was a small settlement. It was peaceful, almost idyllic, but there was something about it that made my stomach knot. It was too quiet, too still. The warrior dismounted, and I followed suit, my heart racing. He didn't look at me as he spoke, his voice calm, but with an edge to it that I hadn't heard before. "This is where you will find your place," he said. I didn't understand. What did he mean? "What do I do here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The warrior turned to face me then, his eyes soft, but filled with something I couldn't quite place. "You will know when the time comes," he said, his voice steady. "For now, stay close." I nodded, my mind racing with questions, but I didn't speak. There was something in his tone, something that told me I would have to trust him, that the answers I was seeking would come in their own time. We moved down the hill toward the settlement, the air growing warmer as we approached. The buildings were simple, made of wood and stone, and the people we passed gave us brief, curious glances before returning to their tasks. The warrior led me to a small building at the center of the settlement, where a group of people stood waiting. They were watching us, their expressions unreadable, but I could sense the tension in the air. The warrior stopped in front of them, his posture strong and confident, and I stood beside him, unsure of what to do next. One of the men stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he looked at me. He was tall, with weathered skin and a hard gaze. but there was a hint of recognition in his eyes. He spoke, his voice deep and rough. "Is this the one?" he asked the warrior, his gaze flicking to me. The warrior nodded, his expression unreadable. "She is ready," he said simply. The man looked at me again, his gaze piercing, but I held his stare, refusing to show fear. I had come this far, and I wasn't going to back down now. "We'll see," the man said, his voice low. He turned and nodded toward the others, who began to move. The warrior placed a hand on my shoulder, and I could feel the weight of his words in the silence that followed. "Trust in yourself," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You are not just a survivor. You are a part of something greater." His words struck deep inside me, and I knew, in that moment, that I was ready. Whatever was to come, I would face it with strength, with courage. I was not just here to exist anymore. I was here to become someone, and I was going to fight for that. The man who had spoken earlier returned, his expression softer now. "Follow me," he said, and I nodded, stepping forward with the warrior at my side. The world was opening up before me, and I was stepping into it, no longer afraid, no longer just surviving. I was living, and I was ready to face whatever came next. I stood in the center of the settlement, surrounded by the people who had come to witness this moment. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of everything that had led me here pressing down on my chest. The warrior stood beside me, as always, his presence a steady anchor in the chaos of my thoughts. I had come so far, faced so many obstacles, but now, standing here, I realized that the real journey was only just beginning. The man who had spoken to us earlier, the one who had looked at me with those piercing eyes, stepped forward again. His face was still hard, but there was something different in his expression now, something that spoke of understanding. He motioned for me to follow him, and I did without hesitation, the warrior at my side. As we walked through the settlement, I couldn't help but notice the way the people looked at me. There was no fear in their eyes, no hatred, just a quiet respect. It was a look I had never known, and I realized, in that moment, how much I had longed for it. We reached a large building at the center of the settlement, its walls made of rough-hewn stone, a symbol of strength and endurance. The man opened the door, motioning for me to enter. The warrior stayed close, his presence a comforting reminder that I was not alone. Inside, the room was simple but welcoming, a stark contrast to the coldness I had grown used to. There was a table at the center, and around it, several others sat, their faces weathered but kind. They were the leaders of this place, the ones who had watched us with quiet interest as we had arrived. The man who had led us inside gestured for me to sit, and I did, my hands resting on my lap, my mind racing with questions I didn't know how to ask. The warrior sat beside me, his silence as comforting as it was unnerving. The man who had brought us in spoke again, his voice low and steady. "You've come a long way," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "And we've watched you. We've seen your strength, your determination. You are not like the others." His words hung in the air, and I felt the weight of them settle over me. I had never thought of myself as different, but here, in this place, with these people, I realized that I wasn't just someone who had survived the trials of the world. I was someone who had the potential to shape the future, to make a difference. The warrior's hand brushed mine, a simple gesture, but one that reminded me that I was not alone in this. I wasn't just here to survive, I was here to build something. "You are ready," the man said, his voice breaking through my thoughts. "This is where you belong. This is where you will find your purpose." I looked around at the faces of the people in the room, their expressions soft but strong, filled with an understanding that spoke volumes. They knew what I had been through, what I had endured, and they were offering me a place, a chance to be part of something greater than myself. The warrior stood, motioning for me to follow. As I rose, I felt a sense of finality, as though the path I had been walking had come to a conclusion, and now a new journey was beginning. We left the room and stepped outside into the sunlight, the warmth of the day greeting us like an old friend. The warrior didn't say anything as we walked through the settlement, but I could feel the shift in the air, the sense that everything had changed. I had found my place here, among these people. I had found a home. As we walked together, I realized that the warrior had not just led me through the physical landscape of this world. He had led me through the landscape of my own heart. He had shown me that I was not defined by my past, by the pain I had endured. I was defined by what I chose to become. The warrior stopped at the edge of the settlement, looking out over the land that stretched before us. I stood beside him, feeling the weight of the moment, the realization that everything had led to this. "You are more than you think," he said, his voice soft but filled with conviction. I looked at him, and for the first time, I truly understood what he meant. I had always thought I was just surviving, just getting by, but now I knew I was living, and I was ready to step into the future with the strength and confidence that had always been inside me. We didn't need to say anything more. We stood there, side by side, watching as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. The future was wide open before me, and I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. The warrior had taught me what it meant to live, and now, it was time for me to begin the next chapter of my story.